takes us, how it leads us back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then what we can actually do with that, what we can do with that relationship that we build with Allah. The second stage was to reform the people around you, the individuals around you. When you reform the individuals around you, then you start to spread the impact. You start to spread that reform. And then after the individuals around you, you start doing things on a more organizational level. So the community that you're a part of, or the communities that you are a part of, you start to reform them as a whole. And then from there, you move on to reforming communities that you're not a part of, other communities, developing those communities. So we focused on how to develop ourselves, how to improve ourselves, and how to guide ourselves towards Islah for ourselves. But now we move on to our communities, the individuals around us, the people around us, the Islah that isn't Islah just of myself, but of that which is around. And it's important, it's necessary, in fact, it's wajib. We have to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Tilka ummatun qad khalat. There was a nation or nations that came before you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us of the relationship between us and the nations that came before us. And in truth, the relationship He tells us about is that there isn't one. Tilka ummatun qad khalat. Laha ma kasabat. For them is what they did. Whatever they did, it will affect them. وَلَهُمْ مَا كَسَبْتُمْ. And whatever you do will affect you. For you is what you've done. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on and He says, وَلَا تُسْأَلُونَ أَمَّا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He goes on and He says, and you won't be asked about what you didn't do. You won't be asked about what the people who came before you did. But see, the thing about this verse is, it's not talking about you as an individual. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Tilka ummatun qad khalat, He's talking about a people. Laha ma kasabat. What they did is for them. Walahum ma kasabtum. That sound at the end, walahum ma kasabtum, that means Allah is not talking to one person, He's talking to a group of people. For them is what they did, and for you as a collective is what you do. As a collective. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on and He says, وَلَا تُسْأَلُونَ أَمَّا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. And you won't be asked about things you haven't done. But here's the deal. The way that Allah puts it, it tells us that we will be asked about things that not only I have done, but I'll be asked about things that my people have done, that my nation has done, that my communities and my societies that I'm a part of have done. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in this verse. By comparing the two and the actions and the accountability of the two, He's showing us that you're not going to be judged just as individuals, but that's what we were always taught, right? We were always and consistently taught that I am accountable for what I do. وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. For every atom's weight of good you do, you will feel it, and for every atom's weight of bad you do, you will feel it. It's all about me. I'm responsible for myself. On the Day of Judgment, no mother will look to their son, no father will look to their child, no brother to their sister, no friend to their friend. On that day, it's every man for themselves. On that day, it's just you, right? But according to this verse, no, it's not just you, because you'll be responsible for actions of those people around you. Now, there's a certain level of responsibility that you hold. You'll not be held 100% accountable for things that you haven't done, but there's a certain level of accountability that still relies with you. And we spoke about this, I think it was yesterday, in yesterday's lecture, where we spoke about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wished to send down azab, when He wished to send down His punishment on the town. It was a short time after the time of Nabi Musa. And I won't go into depth again about the story because I mentioned it yesterday, but what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say when He found a man who had secluded himself and he reads his salah and constantly sticks to salah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He's asked, should I remove that man, should I save that man? He says, it starts with him. My punishment will begin with that man. And in that story, Angel Jibreel, he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's like, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, the man is doing sajda, the man is calling out to you, the man, he's a believer in you. Why is it that it starts with him? Why does the punishment begin with him? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds, He's like, what? He says, what good is His love for me if He doesn't care when I'm being disobeyed? If it doesn't affect Him or impact Him when other people around Him are going against me, what good is that love for me? True love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when not only do you act upon everything He's told you to, but it hurts you when the people around you don't act upon it. And I will say, sometimes we have to give ourselves credit. We're better Muslims than we always give ourselves credit for. We put ourselves down quite a lot, but you know what? We are better Muslims than we give ourselves credit for. And it shows in this point, because when somebody goes against Islam, it does affect us. Whether you realize it or not, it does. And the proof of that is that if tomorrow your parents, for those of you who have parents and for those of you whose parents have passed away, your children, or somebody close to you who you've grown up knowing to be a Muslim, they turn around to you and say, I'm no longer a Muslim. I no longer believe in Allah. I no longer believe in the tenets of Islam. I don't believe it anymore. Tomorrow morning they wake up, they tell you that. You still have a relationship with them, but it will affect your relationship. It will have an impact on you. You won't see them in exactly the same way as you did today when they were a Muslim. What that tells you is that your love for them, it still is linked with your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we give ourselves credit for that much. We want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be obeyed, whether we realize it or not. Certain elements, they are more obvious to us than others. But here we realize that we have a responsibility, but why? How does somebody else's actions have an impact on what happens to me in the afterlife? How can that be fair? For one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us here in this hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to care when He's being disobeyed in the world. Secondly, if you think that the people around you in this world don't have an impact on you, don't have an influence on you, then you're heavily mistaken. The people around you have a massive impact, more so your friends than anybody else for the ages that most of you are at. Your friends will have massive influence on you. If you have good friends, they'll lead you down a good path. If you have bad friends, they'll lead you down a bad path. And you hear it a lot, but it's only when you see it that you really recognize it. One friend can turn you completely away from Islam, or that same one friend can turn you completely towards Allah. The people around you have an impact on yourself. So to protect yourself, you have to also do this islah of those in society. You have to also reform those in society. It's important and it's necessary. It's required. But this islah, I'm going to change the name of it for today's lecture and put it into words that you might understand a little bit more, that you might be a little bit more familiar with. Because when we're talking about doing islah of others, what that really translates to is amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. Encouraging good and discouraging that which is wrong. And this serves two purposes. When you do amr bil ma'ruf nahy anil munkar, it serves two purposes. The first purpose we see in Surah Al Imran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Kuntum khayrun ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas. You are the greatest of nations amongst all of mankind. In the history of creation of mankind, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us you are the greatest nation. Why? تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْحَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. You encourage people towards good and you discourage them away from that which is wrong. See, the first purpose of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar is to do what? Is to elevate ourselves. See, it might feel like when I go to school, it might feel like if I do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, someone's gossiping, someone's backbiting, someone's doing something they shouldn't be. If I correct them, all of a sudden, I'm the spoil sport. I'm the one who's no fun. I'm the one who's boring. If I correct them, if I told them, don't do that, you shouldn't do that, I'm the one who's a problem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, He's saying, no. If you do, that's what rises you up. That's what makes you the greatest of nations. Forget your class. Go to a much bigger scale. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not talking about 20 kids in a class, 30 kids in a class. No, He's talking about all of mankind. You want to rise above mankind? Kuntum khayrun ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas. You are the greatest nation amongst all of mankind. Why? Ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar. You encourage good and you discourage evil. The first purpose is encouragement of good and discouragement of evil. The second purpose is what? We recite in Dua Kumail, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Allahumma ighfir li ad-dhunub allati tahbisu ad-du'a. Oh Allah, forgive all those sins of mine which block the acceptance of dua. Oh Allah, forgive all those sins of mine which stop my du'as from being accepted. There'll be many times where you ask Allah for your hajat. You ask Him for something or other, and in fact you should. It's highly recommended. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He waits for you to ask something of Him. So you should ask Allah for things. And it doesn't have to be something religious. It can be anything. As long as it's halal, Bismillah, ask for it. Turn to your Lord, ask Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to, but in Dua Kumail, as taught to us by Imam Ali and before him Nabi Khidr, the Prophet and our Imam, they both make this dua and they are asking Allah, forgive those sins of mine which stop my du'as being accepted. So a man comes to our third Imam, Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam once. And he asks him, Ya Imam, what are those sins that stop du'as being accepted? And amongst those, Imam Hussein says, those who do not do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, they place a blocker between their du'as and acceptance. You stop your du'as being accepted if you don't do Amr bil Ma'ruf Nahi anil Munkar. Oftentimes when we think of the wajib acts, when we think of the things that we have to do, you think of your namaz, you think of fasting in Ramadan, you think of going to Hajj at some point in your life. These are the things we think of, right? But Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar are just as important. If you look at the wording of that dua, Allahumma ghfir li ad-dhunub allati tahbisu ad-du'a. Forgive all of those mistakes of mine, all of those sins of mine which prevent the blocking of dua. Which means to not do Amr bil Ma'ruf, to not do Nahi anil Munkar, that in itself is a mistake and can be classed as a sin. Because it is wajib upon us to do. To encourage good and to discourage evil. It's necessary. We have to at every situation, at every station, and we're told again and again in the Holy Quran in different ways, shapes and forms, to elevate those around us, improve those around us. And if we come to these majalis as Azadar of Abu Abdullah Hussein, then it becomes our responsibility. If I'm going to cry over Imam Hussein, then I should be part of his mission as well. I should enjoin myself in his mission. And in fact, at one point Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he also uses the words Amr bil Ma'ruf as to why he left Medina, as to why he went on this journey and this qiyam, this stand of Karbala. He says, Talib al-Islah and uridu Amr bil Ma'ruf. And I wanted to do Amr bil Ma'ruf. I wanted to encourage good and I wanted to discourage evil. So how does Imam Hussein alayhi salam do Amr bil Ma'ruf? How does Imam Hussein alayhi salam do Nahy anil Munkar? We see a beautiful example of it in his life, and it's again a story many of you will be familiar with, where him and Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam, they see a man getting ready to do his salah. And as he's getting ready to do his salah, he goes to do wudu, as we must. But they see the man, in whatever way, shape or form, he's doing wudu incorrectly. There's something about his wudu that is not correct. And so they decide, we should correct him. We should improve his wudu. We should show him the right way. This too is Amr bil Ma'ruf. This too is Nahy al Munkar. So what do? Do they go up to the man and tell him, you're doing it wrong? He's an elderly man, an old man who's doing it wrong. These are two young men at the time. Young men is an exaggeration. They're two young boys at the time. So what do? They go to the man and they say, excuse me, will you help us? The man says, tell me, how can I help you? They look at him and they go, we can't decide between the two of us whose wudu is correct. Can you help us decide whose wudu is correct? Between Imam Hassan and Hussein. They both do wudu. Both their wudus are correct. Of course, both their wudus are identical. The man, upon seeing this, it makes him think, hold on, that's not how I do my wudu. Hold on, that's not how I prepare myself for salah. Maybe I'm the one in the wrong. From that, he learns his lesson. And with that, the key is that he's not embarrassed. In fact, they elevated him and raised him up. They said to him, can you judge which of ours is better? Rather than putting him down, they raised him up. See, when you do Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahy anil Munkar, the most important thing is the manner in which you do it. Encouraging good, discouraging evil, it's wajib, it's important, absolutely. But to do it in the right way, that is key. To do it in the right way is important. Imam Ali alayhi salam tells us the first way to do it, or the first step, or the first thing that we have to take into account. He says, when you advise somebody in private, you make a friend for life. But when you correct somebody in public, you make an enemy. It's true. People don't like being embarrassed or corrected in front of other people. Whatever it is, people don't like it. Advise in private. Your friend does something wrong, don't call him out in front of a whole crowd of people. Don't call him out in front of everybody. Go and tell him in private when it's just the two of you. Go and tell him in a manner that will actually impact him. First thing is privacy. Don't embarrass them in front of people. Do it in private where they won't feel like you're trying to show them up. That's the first thing. The second thing is the manner in which you do it. Be respectful. In fact, in the Holy Quran, when we look at the story of Nabi Musa, we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says something very curious to Nabi Musa. When Nabi Musa has to go to Fir'aun and address Fir'aun's tyranny over the people, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instruct Nabi Musa to do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, don't call him Fir'aun. Nabi Musa asks, Ya Allah, why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, he doesn't like the name Fir'aun. So when you go to him, use the names which he likes. The name of Fir'aun which he likes, it escapes my memory right now, but there was a specific name that he liked. He says, use this name instead, because Fir'aun likes that name. Ya Allah, this is a tyrant ruler. He's killed your people. He's banished your prophet. He's trying to attack those who believe in you. He's persecuting them actively. But you're telling Fir'aun, go and speak to him softly. The word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses, speak to him softly. When you go, use the name that he likes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, go and be nice to this very, very horrible man. Ya Allah, why? Because if you are not, if you approach them in a manner that they dislike and that you know they're going to dislike, right from the off, you're shutting all doors for improvement from them. Because rather than listening to what you have to say, they're going to hear what you're saying and immediately they're going to decide, you know what, forget this, I'm not listening to this, I don't want to hear this. Because the manner you approach them was wrong. The manner you approach them has to be correct at every instance. In fact, at the event of Mubahala, when the Christians of Najran approach our Holy Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, how do they first approach him and what does the Prophet respond? See, initially when the Christians arrive in the city of Medina to speak to the Prophet, to question him on this new religion that he's telling everybody about, to question him about this Lord that he's telling everybody about, they arrive wearing robes of silk and gold and what have you. They arrive wearing jewelry and all sorts to show their status, to show how important they are. And the Prophet has called them. The Prophet's invited them to speak to him. They go to approach the Prophet to speak to him. The Prophet turns away. The Prophet doesn't answer them. They try to speak to the Prophet doesn't respond. They go to Amir al-Mu'mineen, they ask him, why is the Prophet not responding? He's called us here and now he's ignoring us. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he looks at them, he says, look at the manner you've arrived in. You've come here trying to show that you're better than him or that you're better than somebody else. You've tried to show that you're some great person. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says to those Christian scholars, he says, change your clothes. Come with humility and the Prophet will speak to you. Come with humility and the Prophet will address you. He'll answer all your questions, all your queries. He'll sit with you. He'll spend as much time with you as you like. But come with humility. So they change into plain white robes. They come to the Prophet and like they say, they engage in discussion. See, the manner in which you approach someone is key. It's so important because if your manner is wrong, then you'll never get the right outcome. If you approach somebody without good akhlaq, if you approach somebody without a positive outlook, you're not going to get a positive response from them. It's simple. And we can see it in our lives, but sometimes we forget to apply it. For whatever reasons, we forget to apply it. It's important to remember that my intention and my action, they should always follow. If my intention is good, if my intention is to improve this person, to do Amar bil Ma'ruf, to do Nahi anil Munkar, to do something that is good for this person, then my actions should follow in the same vein. My actions should also be well thought out. My actions should also be actions that display I want to do something good for you. They shouldn't be trying to put someone down. They shouldn't be trying to embarrass them or anything like that. The second thing I'll say is that when we do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, one of the most important things which a lot of us forget is that if I'm going to encourage others to improve, if I'm going to encourage others to be better, discourage them from doing that which is wrong, then I also have to be open to receiving that same encouragement and discouragement. I have to be open to receiving advice from others. Too many times we're quick and ready to correct somebody else when they get something wrong, but if somebody corrects me, then I take offense. If somebody corrects me, then I think, oh no, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's on about. I know better. If you want to be able to encourage others and for them to receive it in a good way, don't forget to be open to advice yourself, open to encouragement and discouragement yourself. When you open yourself up to it, then people can truly see, you know what, this guy, he's genuine. This guy, he's not just doing it for the show. He's not showing off. He's not trying to put me down. He's genuine. You build a relationship. I can advise him. He can advise me. We have that relationship between us. We're able to do that. If you don't open yourself up for encouragement and discouragement, then you're shutting other people off from receiving it from you as well. It's important. And what shape does this encouragement and discouragement take? There's many different ways. When we talk about encouraging good, we often think of it as, you know, telling people do this good thing or do that good thing. We forget to actually congratulate somebody when they do something good. For the parents in the room, when your children sit in majlis like this, I promise you, it's not easy for a kid to sit in a majlis for 45 minutes. It's not easy at all. Encourage them. Tell them you're happy with them. Tell them you're proud of them for their behavior in this majlis. MashaAllah, the community here, very well behaved. The children sit and they listen. See, if you encourage them when they do something good as well, then you show them that what they did is good. And you recognize that, you know what, it's not easy for them to do what they do. And I say this, and I'll bring it back to salah again. Because when it comes to namaz, when it comes to salah, there will be people who, they're not very committed to their salah. They're not very committed to their namaz. And again, this goes out to the parents in the room. If your children read their namaz and their namaz finishes in about 3-4 minutes, don't constantly tell them you read it too quickly. Don't constantly tell them how did you finish it that quick. Because for them, they're at a stage right now where they want to get it over and done with. Khair, that's part of life. People go through that phase. You go through that stage of life. Tell them well done for reading their salah. Even though they didn't have the effort or the energy, or they don't really know exactly why they're doing it or what they're getting from it. They don't feel it, but they're still doing it. Maybe they speed through it a little bit, but they're doing it. Encourage that. When you encourage that, then you'll build them up to recite salah the way that you expect salah to be recited from a child that you raised, from a child that you educated, because you look at it from that angle, right? This is how I taught my child. This is how I want my child to be. But the thing is, your child isn't born perfect. You have to grow them. You have to raise them. That's how it works. They start off from zero. It's your job to raise them up. You can't expect them to be at 100% right from the off. So encourage them until they get to the point. Encourage them. I remember, and this is a story for myself, I went to a school, a secondary school, where teachers were very negative. They were really negative. It was to the point where, for instance, and I've got friends who did they did the foundation papers at school, right? And they would come to the teachers and they'd say, you know what, I think I'm ready to do higher paper. I think I can. The teachers would be like, no, you can't do that. Don't worry about it. You just stick to foundation. You're not going to be able to do higher paper. And me, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't always the best academically. So my homework, it wasn't always the best, right? I used to get in quite a bit of trouble for it. I remember when I then moved to a new sixth form, it was a completely different sixth form, and it was a completely different attitude of learning. It was a very positive environment in my sixth form. There was one day, and in that positive environment, I flourished. I was showing up to lessons, I was doing my work, I was getting my homework done. I actually felt like, you know what, I'm enjoying these lessons all of a sudden. And I remember there was one time where I'd forgotten to do my homework. And so it was an English essay. I did English literature at A-level. Don't ask me why, but that was one of my choices. I decided, right, this is what I'm going to do, and I had an essay to write. And I got to about 10 minutes before the lesson, I thought, oh, I haven't written it. So on the way to listen, I quickly scribbled down like one paragraph. That was it. One paragraph, and I handed it in. The teacher didn't see it, but when she marked it, the next lesson, I was getting ready to get told off. I was getting ready to be spoken to the way I used to be spoken to in my secondary school. I was ready for the teacher to be like, Zaki, what on earth is this? This is terrible. This is rubbish. I got it back, and it had written at the bottom, this is a really good start. If you carry on in this vein, then you'll have a brilliant essay. And I looked at it, and I remember I asked my teacher, I was like, are you not angry? Are you not got anything else to say? Like, why are you not telling me off for this? This is clearly not a great piece of work. I've written one paragraph. I was meant to write an essay. And the teacher was like, no, I can see there's promise here. It's good. I'm telling you, that teacher, from that moment on, she never had to bug me to do my work again. From that moment on, I was like, you know what? Cool. I did good. All right, I'll do more. I finished that essay on my own accord. The teacher didn't tell me to. And I don't want to set a bad example, but this is coming from someone who really wasn't a good student at A-level. I didn't have the motivation to study. I didn't have the energy to study. But because of that teacher, I got the energy. I got the motivation. I wanted to. Why? Because instead of putting me down, that teacher encouraged me. That teacher raised me up in that moment. And I thought, you know what? I can do better. I can do even better. And so I did. See, those moments of encouragement, they act as such an important moment. and they will go down in the memory of those who you encourage. People remember those who improve them. People remember those who advise them, so long as it's done in a correct way. My mother, she always uses this phrase, and I like it very much. She says, you'll catch a lot more flies with honey than you will with salt. With kindness, with softness, you'll catch a lot more people onto your message. A lot more people will come towards you and listen to you if you approach them with kindness, and if you approach them in a sweet way, in a soft way, in a way that they will appreciate. If you're constantly harsh, and look, sometimes you do have to lay down the law a little bit. I'm not denying that. But if you're constantly and consistently harsh, then the value of what you're saying, it will lose itself. If you're constantly and consistently harsh, then it will just become you'll have the personality of someone who's never satisfied. That's not who you want to be. You want to be somebody who is happy and proud and impressed with the people around them, particularly your children, for the parents in the room. And then when that individual wants you to do a little bit better, you have all the more motivation to do it. You have all the more energy to do it. Why? Because I care about this person. I can see they care about me. Amr bil ma'roof nahy anil munkar. It's how we will reform society, the individuals around us, and that's how we make ourselves part of Imam Hussein alayhi salam's mission. Go look at Karbala. Go look at the Amr bil ma'roof of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I'm not going into Masa'ib yet, but go look at what he did. First, he gives the army of Hur water. With his own 2 hands, he gives water to the soldiers of Hur. This is the soldiers that have been sent to capture him and eventually kill him. Go look at Ashura. How many times do we hear the cry of Imam Hussein on Ashura, Hal min nasirin yansuruna? Is there anybody out there to help us? If you ask any scholar, why did Imam Hussein say that? Why did he call out, is there anybody out there to help us? The response you will get is that Imam Hussein wanted to give the soldiers of Yazid one final chance to come to the right path. One final chance to come to the path of Islam, to come towards heaven. Imam Hussein, he knew, if one person comes towards me, it won't change my fate. I've got armies of thousands in front of me. One person coming here, it won't make a difference. Imam Hussein was giving the soldiers the chance. This is Amr bil Ma'roof in action in Karbala. When we say we must learn from the Fada'il and the Masa'ib of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, this is what we're looking at. This is what we're talking about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these examples. And we realize that when your nature is such, you have an impact on the people around you. An impact that is unimaginable. And alhamdulillah, I've had the chance to see it. From the minbar, from engaging with communities, each and every person, and we were speaking about this last night, in fact, a few of us sat here. Every one of us has the ability to make a difference to lives around us. In every interaction, you have the ability to change lives. Whether you realize it or not, it's true. So make sure that you're changing lives for the better. Make sure that what you're doing is improving those around you. Because then you can truly say, I am part of the mission of Aba Abdullah. Recite aloud, salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. And the mission of Aba Abdullah, the reason that we give so much importance to it, is because Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala, he showed us just how important that mission was. Imam Hussein could have given just his own life, and we would have realized it was a great sacrifice. We remember the sacrifices of all our other A'immah. All our other Imams, we remember their sacrifices, but Aba Abdullah stands head and shoulders above the rest because he gave everything. Absolutely everything that Aba Abdullah had, he gave in the way of Islam. Tonight we remember possibly one of the most difficult times of Aba Abdullah's time in Karbala. We remember the most difficult shahada that Aba Abdullah had to go through. How do I know that this was the most difficult? How do I know that this was the one that really hurt Aba Abdullah the most? Every shahadat, every loss of life hurt my Mawla. But it came until this point where Aba Abdullah, he said something that he hadn't said at any other point. This was the point where Aba Abdullah, he turns towards Medina, he calls out, Ya Rasulullah, my grandfather Rasulullah, I wish my Shia could see me in this moment. That was the point where Hussein ibn Ali remembers each and every one of us. When was it? When Hussein gave the life of his baby Asghar. Now, how did that day go? The day did not simply start with Ashura, but the night before, on the 9th of Muharram, as Abu Abdullah walks between the tents, listening to what the mothers are saying to their sons, what the sisters are saying to their brothers, what wives are saying to their husbands, he comes to the tent of Bibi Rabab. My salams on Bibi Rabab. What a sacrifice she gave of all the women in Karbala. After Sayyidah Zainab, Bibi Rabab's sacrifice was the greatest. She had nothing left after the story of Karbala, Kufa and Sham. And we see it in that moment. She's in the tent as Hazrat Ali Asghar is in his cradle. Bibi Rabab is crying. She is crying to the point where Mawla Hussein, who is standing outside the tent, he walks in and he goes, Rabab, what is it that makes you cry at this time? Why are you crying on this night? Bibi Rabab, she turns to Mawla Hussein. She says, my master, there is no doubt amongst anybody now that tomorrow there will be a war. There is no doubt amongst anybody now that tomorrow everybody will go and give their lives. Zainab is preparing Aun and Muhammad. Farwa is preparing Qasim. Layla is preparing Akbar. Now I sit here and I think to myself, what can I do? I only have 2 children. Neither of them are capable of war. One is my daughter Sakina, and girls cannot go to war. The other is my baby Asghar, and babies cannot fight. So what will I do when I have to face Zahra on the day of judgment? But my heart goes out to Bibi Rabab. Bibi Rabab, what can I tell you of your sacrifice? The battle of Asghar was the most poignant of all the soldiers. The life of Sakina was the most painful of all the prisoners. Bibi Rabab, it was your sacrifice that left you in the sunlight till your final days. Bibi Rabab refused to enter the shade after Karbala, but it was her sacrifice that made Karbala what it was. The day of Ashura arrives. Bibi Kulthum, the women and children, Bibi Kulthum, Bibi Zainab, Bibi Farwa, Bibi Layla, one by one they bid farewell to all the Shuhada of Karbala. The point comes now where Abu Abdullah has nobody left. He has given Abbas and Akbar and Qasim and Aun. He's given Muhammad and Hur and Habib and John. Nobody is left in the camps of Abu Abdullah. Hussein walks out towards the battlefield. He calls out those famous words, Hal min nasirin yansurana. Is there anybody left out there to help us? As he calls this out, he hears a crying coming from his own camp. Abu Abdullah returns to the tents. He addresses the women. He says, do not worry, Hussein is still alive. Don't shed your tears yet. The women respond, Ya Abu Abdullah, we recognize you are still alive. You are still here. The reason we're crying is because when you called out, is there anybody left to help us? Asghar threw himself from his cradle to the ground. Since then he has begun crying and screaming, and none of us can stop him. In that moment, Abu Abdullah, he looks and he sees Ali Asghar being passed from lap to lap. Sometimes Zainab takes him and tries to stop him crying, but Asghar will not stop. Sometimes Layla or Farwa takes him. His mother Rabab takes him. No one can console Akbar, to the point where the little girl Sakina has Asghar in her arms. She tries to console her baby brother, but Asghar's tears will not stop. In that moment, Abu Abdullah, he reaches his arms out. He takes Asghar in his arms. He whispers something into the ears of his child. Immediately the tears turn to laughter. Asghar, he now goes with Imam Hussein to Bibi Rabab. Mawla Hussein says, Rabab, let me take Asghar to the battlefield. Let me see if I can get some water for my child. Abu Abdullah knows this is his final chance to do something for his son. This is his final chance to do something for his Asghar. He says to Bibi Rabab, let me take my child. Let me see if I can get him some water. As Abu Abdullah turns to leave the tent, Bibi Rabab, she calls after Mawla Hussein. She says, my master Hussein, wait, bring me my Asghar. She takes Asghar into her arms. She goes back in towards one corner of her tent. She comes out a short while later and hands Asghar back to Imam Hussein, but this time Asghar's hair is combed. Asghar is wearing a new kurta. This time Asghar has been made to look presentable. I will ask, Bibi Rabab, what are you presenting Asghar for? Why did you comb his hair? Why did you change his clothes? My heart tells me the reply would come. I know now. When Asghar leaves this tent, it will be Zahra who welcomes him into her arms. I want Asghar to go to his grandmother, looking like a grandson should. Abu Abdullah, he takes Asghar out from the tent, but because of the heat of the sun in that desert, Asghar is hidden under the Aba of Hussein. Asghar is hidden in the shade of Hussein's Aba. The armies of Yazid, they see Abu Abdullah approaching with something hidden under his Aba. They begin to laugh and jeer, calling out, look, Hussein has brought the Quran, thinking that we will have mercy on him for its sake. Hussein brought the Quran, but not the written one that they have read. No, when Hussein raised up in his arms Asghar, the spoken Quran spoke. In that moment, Hussein calls out, will you bring some water for my child? There was no response. He calls out again, look, your crime is with me. Look, your anger is with me. My child has done nothing to hurt you. Bring him some water. Again, no response. Hussein calls out a third time. For 3 days, my child has had nothing to drink. Will somebody bring him something? Again, no response. This time, Abu Abdullah lowers Asghar. He holds him to his chest. He calls out once more. He says, perhaps you think that when you bring water for Asghar, I will drink it myself. Here, I will hand my Asghar to you. Give him water yourself. Hussein won't drink anything. He takes off his Aba. He places it on the sands of Karbala. He places baby Asghar in the Aba. He steps away, but still no water came. Instead now, Hussein lifts up Akbar Asghar in his arms. He holds him and he whispers to his child, Asghar, you could not hold a sword like your uncle Abbas. You could not fight like your grandfather Ali. But Asghar, your name is in the list of Shuhada. Asghar, your life is to be given. So Asghar, go fight your battle now. In saying this, Hussein raises Asghar up into the sky once more. The beating sun beams down on Asghar in the desert. As it does, Asghar, with a smile on his face, he runs his tongue over his dry lips. The armies of Yazid watch. Many of them begin to weep. They hide their faces. Some of them run from the battlefield. In this moment, a cry is heard. Hurmala, iqta kalamul Hussein. Silence the word of Hussein. What does Hurmala do? He pulls a 3-headed arrow. In the times of archery, arrows had different purposes. A 1-headed arrow was used to pierce the skin of a man in war. A 3-headed arrow was used to pierce the neck of a horse or a camel, or in some instances to pierce the trunk of a tree. Look at the difference between the trunk of a tree and the neck of a 6-month-old Asghar. Hurmala raises his bow with the arrow ready. But what do we see? Hurmala drops his arrow. He picks it up again, drops it a second time. 3 times Hurmala does this. A man by the name of Sunin, he comes and he says, Hurmala, if anybody were to ask me, Who is the greatest archer and marksman in all of Arabia? I would not hesitate to say your name. What is it, Hurmala, that in this moment when faced with a child, not moving, not running, you cannot fire your arrow towards him? Hurmala says, it is not the child I am afraid of, but every time I raise my bow and arrow, I can see the tents opening and closing as though a mother is watching her child from the tent. Hurmala a fourth time raises his bow. This time his eyes fixed on Asghar. He draws the string of the bow back. As he lets go, the silence that falls in Karbala can be heard for miles. Now, no horse is neighing, no chains are jangling, no swords are clashing, no soldiers are speaking. Karbala falls silent as Hussein watches this arrow pierce through the air of Karbala. As it flies through the air, Hussein takes Asghar in his arms. He shields his child, but Asghar jumps forward. The arrow strikes Asghar min udhun ila al-udhun, from one ear to the other ear. Hussein, in that moment, he looks down. He has his baby boy's body on his hands. I'm coming towards the end of my side with the last few lines. In a few days, on the day of Ashura, we will all come together for the A'mal. In those A'mal, we will replicate what my Mawla did in this moment. What does Hussein do? He turns towards the tent of Rabab. He begins walking towards the tent. But before he gets there, he stops, he turns back. He walks back into the battlefield. He stops again, returns towards the tent. Stops again and back to the battlefield. 7 times back and forth. The whole while calling out, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Hussein now, he looks down, the blood of Asghar boiling out from his neck, bubbling out from his neck. He takes the blood of Asghar in his hands. Hussein looks up towards the sky. He looks down towards the ground. A cry is heard in Karbala. Hussein, if the blood of Asghar is brought up to this sky, then no drop of rain shall ever fall. If a drop of Asghar's blood touches the ground, then no crops will grow from this ground. What can Abu Abdullah do? He takes the puddle of blood in his hands, his eyes fixed on the blood of Asghar. He runs his hands over his face. Now Hussein's face, Hussein's beard, dripping in the blood of Asghar. He returns to the tent of Rabab finally. I won't complete the Masa'ib, but I'll say one final line. As he comes back to the tent of Bibi Rabab, he hands this 6-month-old over to his mother. Bibi Rabab, she takes her child, her tears begin to flow. She turns to Abu Abdullah and she says, Hussein, I have just one question, Ya Mawla, my master. Tell me just one thing. Did they at least give my child some water before they killed him? Or did my Asghar die thirsty as well? ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We raise our hands in dua. We pray to Allah Azza wa Jal. Oh Allah, accept all our ibadat in this holy month of Muharram. Oh Allah, for all those mu'mineen around the world struggling with ill health, in particular our brother Abdullah Abbas, grant them complete shifa. Oh Allah, for all those mu'mineen around the world, all those mu'mineen who are with us until last Muharram, and this Muharram they have left this world, raise their ranks in Jannah. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time. allow us to enter Jannah under his banner.